We're going to go ahead with our, let me just pull up my agenda here. We're going to begin with our opening prayer and our land acknowledgement. So if the land acknowledgement is ready to go, we can go ahead and start with that and then do our opening prayer. Okay, sure, we can do the opening prayer first. That's fine, Jody, leave that there, I'll do that. So if you all join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We come together in hope from different community groups, answering the same call to service, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in gratitude for the trust placed in us, for the opportunity to serve, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in respect, aware of our diversity, willing to work for the good, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in awe of the wonder and beauty of each of God's children, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in God's name, and as we work together toward the same goal, each piece of the puzzle begins to fit neatly into place, creating a breathtaking picture of love, compassion, courage, and grace. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And now for the land acknowledgement.
Each of us has a relationship to the natural environment, the land, water, earth, the habitat, and ecosystems. Land acknowledgements provide us with an opportunity to offer recognition, respect to the original inhabitants of the regions that we live in and work on. There are many things that we can do to go beyond simply reading a land acknowledgement script. To make it more meaningful, we need to consider that we are, in fact, acknowledging not only the ancestral lands, but also the historical and complex intersections of settler impacts on Indigenous histories, economies, ecologies, livelihood, well-being, and governance structures. A territorial acknowledgement is not an endpoint in the journey of reconciliation. Actions create conditions for true reconciliation and create a foundation for restoring, renewing, or developing a new relationship with Indigenous peoples. For hundreds of years, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Attawaddaron, the Potawatomi, the Wendat, and Lenape nations have sought to walk gently on this land. They assisted the first European travelers to this territory and shared their knowledge for survival in what was, at times, a harsh climate. Under consultations from elders, knowledge holders from the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and 6 nations of the Grand River Territory, the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee, along with Halton Catholic District School Board, created this land acknowledgement.
Halton, as we know it today,
is rich in the history and modern traditions
of many First Nations and the Métis.
From the lands of the Anishinaabe
to the Attawaddaron,
the Haudenosaunee,
and the Métis.
These lands surrounding the Great Lakes
are steeped in Indigenous history.
As we gather today
on these treaty lands,
our Catholic social teachings
call us in solidarity
with our Indigenous brothers and sisters
to honor and respect
4 directions:
lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors
that walked before us.
All these wonderful elements of creation exist,
gifted to us by our Creator God. We acknowledge and thank
the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation
for being stewards of this traditional territory.
Great, thank you so much. Do you mind putting up the agenda? Jody, thank you. Okay, wonderful. So thanks again everyone for joining. Moving on to item 1.2 is the approval of the agenda. Everyone would have received a copy of the agenda in their meeting package. Do I have any additions, deletions for the agenda? Okay, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move it. This is Rick.
Thanks, Rick. Can I get a seconder?
Diane?
Thanks, Diane. Okay, moving on to item number 2. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest this evening? Nope, seeing none. Okay, great. Moving right along to item number 3, our presentations. So we do have a presentation this evening. Oh, sorry. Can you? Sorry, that's okay. We have that's okay, Jody. We have Jane and Glenda here this evening to present to us for mental health and well-being. I'm not going to get any more formal than that because you're going to get into your presentation. It is wonderful to have you both here. So thanks for being here this evening. We're looking forward to your presentation. Yeah, so take it away. Would you prefer that we take questions during or at the end?
Maybe at the end would work.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay.
All right, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jane Atchison, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm the Acting Chief Social Worker at the board. I'm joined tonight by Glenda, as Brenda had said. Glenda Brown, our Chief of Mental Health Programming, as well as Oliver Foisey, our Chief Psychologist. And together we're really excited and looking forward to presenting to you information about our summer mental health programming, as well as an overview of HCDSB's annual mental health and addictions action plan for 2022-2023. So next slide, please. Thank you. So to start off, please take a moment to reflect on the statement in relationship to students, schools, and the community. We've been focused on welcoming students and families back to the school this year with hope and optimism. So our commitment as a Catholic school board and in partnership with our schools, we're committed to mentally healthy school environments that honors and celebrates the identities and lived realities of students and makes meaningful connections to life at home and in the community. Glenda.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Jane. So I'd like to start by sharing key messages from School Mental Health Ontario that have supported our return to school this year and will continue to guide us throughout the school year. So how do we move forward after the last few years managing through a pandemic? We proceed together focusing on strengthening the relationships and connections we build with our students and our families, knowing that they really are the foundations that we need to build upon. How do we do this? We do this by prioritizing mental health and well-being as a key condition for every student to learn and flourish. We ensure that every student has access to differentiated and identity-affirming mental health supports and services. We cultivate a shared responsibility to protect and to promote student mental health. We all have a shared responsibility to support student mental health and well-being. We listen and activate student agency, participation, and voice. More than ever, student voice and input into mental health initiatives is critical. We ensure that all school staff know and can recognize when a student is struggling and know the pathways to access support, both in schools and in the community. Educators are typically the first point of contact for students, and we recognize that our educators are really the first ones that would notice a change in a student's baseline. And it's really important that they know how to recognize when there's a change in baseline and then how to connect our students to those supports. A few key resources that we implemented and supported at the beginning of this school year from School Mental Health Ontario really did focus on that re-engagement and building connections with our students and our families. And all of our staff did receive these resources. And I'm just going to share a few very quickly. There was one called the First 10 Days and Beyond. And that really was an excellent resource that really provided educators with specific activities to really kind of re-engage and build those relationships and connections with students, recognizing that many of our students had not been in schools for a few years. Another critical resource that we shared was called Listen, Believe, and Act. And it's a resource to support students' well-being who have been disproportionately impacted in schools. Listening to understand, we know, is a key element in supporting our students' mental health. Believing what students share validates their lived experience, which we know is a very important element, and acting with and for students is integral, and reassuring students that their identities, mental health, and well-being are affirmed, valued, and supported. And lastly, School Mental Health Ontario has developed decision support tools for administrators and classroom teachers that really do help to provide excellent guided questions whenever we're considering bringing in mental health resources, either from externally or speakers. They provide great reflective questions for consideration to ensure that they do support our mentally healthy environments. And those are just a few examples of the key ways. Next slide. We had a very successful summer providing a variety of supports this past year. I know that this slide was shared at your last SEAC meeting, but it's worth reviewing again just to emphasize the ways in which we supported this past summer. Social workers in CYC supported high-risk students and families that were on caseload prior to the summer, just to ensure that kind of continuity of service and to really support those students through the summer months. In addition, for the first time, we were able, HCDSB collaborated with ROC, Reach Out Center for Kids, to offer summer mental health groups. We offered a variety of groups listed on the slide that were offered for students aged 8 to 18, both in person and virtually, to ensure that we were equitable. The response to these groups was fantastic, and the feedback from our students and our families was also extremely positive. We were very happy, and we will look to continue those collaborations in the future. Next slide. So this evening, I'm really pleased to be introducing our annual Mental Health and Addictions Action Plan for 2022-2023 school year. The context of the plan informs how we will support student mental health this year. And so the ongoing priority of the HCDSB is to create welcoming, inclusive, safe, and mentally healthy learning environments that inform and support student achievement and well-being in our Catholic schools. We remain committed to prioritizing equity and as a shared responsibility for all staff. We continue to cultivate and further advance inclusive programs, resources, and practices that protect, promote, and nurture positive mental health and well-being for all learners. And this does ensure that every student has access to culturally responsive, differentiated, and identity-affirming supports and services. The HCDSB tiered model of intervention, which you've heard about many times, provides a consistent model for evidence-based programs and services that involve the promotion of mentally healthy learning environments, especially creating those welcoming spaces for students, especially upon our return to school. They support early identification, prevention, and early intervention. And then at the third tier really does look at those more intensive interventions and supports and services with equity, engagement, and evidence as the foundational pillars at all tiers. And building on the priorities identified in our tiered model of intervention is our HCDSB Mental Health and Addiction 3-year strategy. Tonight, we're really focusing on our Mental Health and Addictions Annual Action Plan. This annual action plan is revised every year in order to respond to emergent needs change and shift from year to year. So we ensure that we are responding to those needs. Over the course of the last school year, the Mental Health and Addictions Advisory and Steering Committee met several times. We also created a subcommittee that met on several occasions, and it included many stakeholders from our community, parents, our student representatives, a variety of different staff members in our board. We met on several occasions just to ensure that all voices were heard, We met with our student trustees on several occasions as well, seeking their input and voice, which was a critical element. And we do sincerely thank everyone who contributed to creating our Mental Health and Addictions Annual Action Plan this year. The 3 priorities identified in our 3-year strategy are student mental health and well-being, mentally healthy learning environments, and inclusive mental health supports and services. Our mental health and addictions action plan supports all of those 3 main priorities in our strategy. Next slide, please. So our annual mental health and addictions action plan has 4 key priority areas that have focused goals to support each our plan throughout the school year. And I'm going to share each of those specific priority areas in more detail. The first priority is engagement, which includes student engagement, parent guardian engagement, and community members. And secondly, mental health literacy in both secondary and elementary panels. Next slide. The third priority area is the tiered model of intervention, which will be addressed more specifically in a few slides. And the fourth and final key area is inclusive mental health resources and capacity building. Next slide. So there are 3 goals supporting engagement and key actions that will take place, that will support each goal. And our first goal supports student engagement. And the key actions are having school-based mental health leadership teams. We want to ensure that student reps are involved in board-level mental health committees, ensuring students have the opportunity to share their input, help plan school-wide mental health initiatives, and for example, having input on things like Mental Health Awareness Week, etc. And lastly, promoting mental health through social media. We know that students use social media as a way to connect, as a way to share information, and we meet students where they're at. We have a very strong mental health Twitter feed. We have a variety of different ways in which we engage students. And just an example of a new initiative this year that our students were able to participate in is we had a collaboration with an agency called Mind Your Mind, where how they describe it is it's the space where mental health, wellness, and technology meet. And they work with community partners and youth to create interactive tools and innovative resources that build capacity and resilience. We had the opportunity to send 2 students from each secondary school and our Alt-Ed schools to meet, come together, and create a mental health resource that was created by them for them. We're looking forward to revealing their finished product in the next few weeks and share it system-wide. The feedback from our students that it was a very positive experience, that they felt heard, valued, and they've created a resource that really meets their needs. So we're excited to see what that unveiling looks like. We do know that student engagement is our priority, and we do look forward to meeting with our students. Every secondary school has identified 2 and will identify 2 student mental health and well-being champions, and we will be bringing those champions out several times throughout the school year to provide training on a variety of topics that they've chosen to build capacity, and the opportunity for them to bring that information and that learning back to their school communities. So we're excited about that. That's just an example of one of our student engagement initiatives. Next slide. The second engagement goal pertains to parent and caregiver engagement. We know the importance of knowing and collaborating with our parent guardian community, and continuing those strong relationships and connections is key, especially after the last few years. The key actions to engage parent caregivers include sharing mental health information and resources provided at the board level, at the school level, through newsletters, on our board website. We are ensuring that our board website does share those especially those evidence-based resources. There's a lot of tips from School Mental Health Ontario for parents specifically, how to talk to your child about mental health, how to notice when your child is experiencing mental health issues. There's a variety of ways in which we share those. We tweet them out, we share them, like I said, at the school level, where schools put them on their on their websites and share them out in a variety of ways. As well as including parents in our Catholic school councils to plan different events around mental health and awareness activities. And we'll continue those. Next slide. And the final goal is related to community engagement. And we know that we have very strong relationships with our collaborative agencies, and we will continue to do that. Our community agencies have representatives on our mental health advisory and steering committee as well. And again, a great example of community engagement was our collaboration around providing the collaboration with ROC around providing those groups throughout the summer. And we have ongoing communication with our community agencies, and they provide very valuable resources and different groups and ways to support our students and families. Next step, next slide. Andrea. So why do we engage students in mental health promotion? We've heard very strongly from our students that it's important to engage them. It provides opportunities for our students to build leadership skills, planning, and facilitation, to expand their connections with other students that they might not otherwise have, to ensure that they develop positive relationships with adults in the school. It provides different opportunities to engage rather than outside of the classroom. It also ensures students feel heard, supported, and their voice being validated. We hear very clearly from our student population that they want to participate and have input. They have amazing ideas, they're creative, and it's very important to ensure that those voices are validated. And we want to ensure that they are involved in different initiatives, especially that impact them and that interest them. And they've been very vocal about sharing the kinds of topics and issues that they're interested in. Next slide. And why is it important to engage our staff? Sorry. My computer's so sorry. My apologies, mine. My apologies. So it's important to make sure that we are engaging students in mental health. We want to ensure that we hear from them directly, show our, oh, I'm on the wrong slide, I apologize. Why is it important to include staff? We want to ensure that we're hearing directly from students. It's important for, no, Andrea, it's my computer that's slow and it's not coordinating. That's okay. We want to ensure that we are hearing directly from the students. It's important for students, again, like we said, to validate student. We want to ensure that they better reach their peers that maybe they wouldn't have typically engaged in these initiatives. It's important for them to also gain knowledge and about effective mediums and vehicles to reach students. Again, like I referenced, we know that students use technology to communicate and to engage. And so it's, again, meeting students where they're at. And again, to better meet the needs of the students that we serve, that we serve on a daily basis. So some of the initiatives that we're focusing on this year are ensuring that there are mental health leadership groups in every school. That's a critical aspect. We want to ensure that mental health is a priority and becomes part of our daily conversation. We want to ensure that schools identify, again, like I referenced, mental health champions to bring out for training. We want to ensure that the inclusion of mental health representatives on student councils. We know that schools have a variety of different committees, and so it's important that mental health is represented on a variety of those committees. And again, just to kind of reduce the stigma and normalize conversations about mental health. We want to amplify and promote mental health consistently and normalize those conversations. Use the resources that are provided by School Mental Health Ontario. We know that mental health staff provide those intentional resources to meet specific needs. And we want to ensure that we are sharing those resources in a variety of different ways. And lastly, I just wanted to say that we are excited to continue working with our students this year, and again, to hear their voices input in meaningful ways, and again, to validate their voice. And we look forward to the many different initiatives that we're unfolding this year. I'm going to turn it over to Jane.
Thank you, Glenda. The second key priority area is mental health literacy, and we have 2 goals in this priority. The first goal and key action includes the consolidation and delivery of mental health literacy and action lessons in all secondary schools. We're in the process of confirming what the rollout plan will be for this year. We're also exploring new mental health literacy lessons that have been created for the elementary panel. Our second goal and key action involves a mental health toolkit, which has been created for all staff to access resources in a centralized location. This toolkit includes evidence-based resources from School Mental Health Ontario, the tiered model of intervention, and other relevant support materials that enhance student mental health. The toolkit is organized in a friendly manner with easy access to the resources required to support specific needs, and will continue to add new resources as they're released from School Mental Health Ontario. The tiered model of intervention is the third key priority area of the Mental Health Addictions Action Plan. There are 3 goals in the tiered focus area. The first goal is to provide system presentations around the tiered model of intervention and accessing services. By providing the system with presentations on the tiered model of intervention, the system will be able to use the model as a guide to the layered mental health supports that are offered. Secondly, in the area of tiered model of intervention, we've focused on life promotion and suicide prevention. A life promotion and suicide prevention manual has been created, and it'll serve as a central location for staff to locate resources to support students. We'll continue to provide assist training and safe talk training to staff. So here you see our newly branded tiered mental health model of intervention, which has been updated and revised. The tiered model is a guide for mental health services at HCDSB. Tier 1 is the foundational work that we do. Tier 2 is responsive support, and Tier 3 is intensive support. All staff in our system have access to the mental health tiered model of intervention. Next slide, please. Thank you. The third goal under the tiered model of intervention focuses on promotion, prevention, and impact of substance abuse and addiction. We will continue to strengthen our collaborations with community partners, including ROC, ADAPT, and Halton Public Health to educate and support students. Now I'll turn it over to Oliver. You're muted, Oliver.
Sorry, it didn't take. Good evening. The fourth key priority area consists of inclusive mental health resources and capacity building. So the key action here is to further develop and provide resources that are culturally responsive, differentiated, and identity affirming in the evidence-based programs and interventions that we share and deliver. So this is reflected in several different ways. For example, through companion documents for evidence-based programs such as SNAP, MindUp, and it's reflected in the books, the visuals, and training videos that we create and deliver. So the second goal is to provide professional learning opportunities to support staff in building capacity that is responsive to the unique experiences of racialized and culturally diverse students. Some examples of HCDSB and School Mental Health Ontario training resources include dismantling anti-Black racism in education, culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, support for a mentally healthy return to school, centering equity, equity and inclusion education series, supporting our diverse school communities in service on the PA Day, trauma-sensitive classroom training and trauma-informed practices, and School Mental Health Ontario mental health resources to support Black and Indigenous youth and culturally adapted CBT training, so that's cognitive behavioral therapy for school mental health professionals that's rolling out now as well. And the third and final goal for inclusive mental health resources and capacity building are the ways we support the mental health and well-being of diverse learners and students with exceptional needs. So for a few examples of the key actions here are the trauma and FASD, equity and inclusion for students with FASD, School Mental Health Ontario Spec Ed resource that included communication strategies to support the mental health of students with special education needs. And a shout out here to Denise Colley, who was part of the writing team in creating this excellent resource. And then there's also resources with special education needs, including specialized classes. And you see some of the specific examples for that support. That includes also the gifted classes, so presentations on perfectionism and procrastination and self-advocacy. So thank you for your time today. We're really excited to be starting the school year strongly with our mental health action plan and looking forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I've got a couple of questions, comments, but I see that Nancy, you have your hand up if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. One specifically is you mentioned about building those relationships, especially with our students, and ensuring that piece and how important it is. What consideration goes into that when CYCs are placed in schools or they're moved to different schools? Because and I'm sure I'm not an expert by any means, but you guys are the experts, and that relationship is so important, and having to rebuild that relationship over again with new people, I think sometimes can be a detriment to our students. So I'm just wondering what consideration happens with that.
I can speak to that, Nancy, and that's a great question. We know that it does take time to build relationships, and that the relationship is a critical element when we are supporting students. A lot of thought and intentionality does go into when we're considering how we deploy CYCs. It is a complex process, and we do take a lot of different factors into consideration. Again, staffing, we've been increasing staff over the course of the last few years. When we're increasing staff, that means that we have to then move one staff that might be providing support for a 0.5. Now we're increasing, a staff at another school to a 1.0, which then means they may have to leave that 0.5 class. We do look at a variety of different things and factors, and we always endeavor, and I always endeavor to reduce the number of moves that actually happen. We recognize, the value of those relationships. So there are times when staff do have to move, and sometimes it's also to meet the needs of specific needs of a school and match it with the skills of the CYC. We do the very best that we can to meet the needs of all schools, and it is a process, especially when we are increasing staff like we did last year. We increased our staff complement FTE by 5, which meant that increased 10 additional schools from a 0.5 to a 1.0, which meant some staff do have to move. And we do really work hard to support those transitions when staff have to move. the CYCs do provide a lot of transition and support to the new CYC going into that school to really help them understand the school culture, to understand the needs, and to identify those students that do require that additional support. So a lot of thought does go into it. We sometimes have to make very challenging decisions, but we do provide support on a variety of levels. There are layers of support. So we do the best we can to meet the needs of our students, families, and schools.
Just a follow up.
Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you. Okay, so and have there been any challenges this year with CYCs and ensuring that because there has been such a focus on mental health, and as you stated in your presentation, especially with the things kind of, I hate using the word normal, because what is normal? I think we've thrown that definition out the window over the last couple of years, but there has been, everything's resumed, and we're seeing and we're hearing from our students, like we heard it even the other night at the board meeting from our student trustees and from student senators, that students are struggling in balancing. So, have we had any challenges in ensuring that, we were ready to hit the ground in September?
Great question, Nancy. And I think that we did a really great job in terms of providing that in-servicing on our September 1st PA day. We in-serviced all staff in the board on a mentally healthy return. We provided multiple resources. We really focused on that connection and building those relationships. As far as specifically to CYCs, all CYCs have been hired. We've had some challenges this year waiting for criminal reference checks. That has delayed the start of a few staff members, but we have provided coverage at every single school from our itinerant staff. And we work very strongly with our administration to help to respond to any identified needs and emergent needs. And we're very hopeful that in the next few weeks, we will be at full complement. We only have a few left to get there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you have another question at all, Nancy?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I just, it's pretty much been answered. I know a couple of schools are still waiting on the CYCs.
Yeah.
I know the itinerants are there. They're not fully there. Like it's not the same as having what their assigned CYCs are. I just worry that we get into especially when we've got children with IEPs that actually require that CYC support in conjunction with their IEPs. It's such an important part of our students' success, especially given what we've just come from. So, I just wonder if that was taken into consideration, because I know the staff too, teachers and EAs, as much as they can try to support the mental health piece, they're also limited as well, right? In trying to play catch up and not necessarily give it. So I just think it's so important that, I understand the itinerants are there to support, but they should, I'm hoping that they're there supporting in the absence of what the CYC would be there as, like if it's 3 days, if it's a 0.5 or what it not, that they're actually physically in there, because now more than ever that we really do need it. And I know that. So I'm just hopeful that that's what's happening.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Nancy.
I'm just trying to see before I ask a question if there's any other questions in there, but I don't see any hands up. And I don't know, this is maybe anecdotal, but I wonder, I know that we obviously coming out of what we've come out of and everything that our students have been through, we did see a big draw on our mental health and wellness resources in our schools, in our board. So many students were struggling more so than ever before. And I'm wondering, are we seeing that getting better a little bit? Are we seeing, obviously students are always going to need those supports, and I'm glad we've been able to find different ways to deliver them, but are we seeing sort of, hopefully a better trend when it's coming to the well-being and mental health of our students in our schools again?
I will say, Brenda, in response to that's a great question. I think that this is where we're very fortunate that we have a very strong tiered model of intervention. And our tiered model really does that tier one around mental health, like the promotion of of positive mental health, the work that our CYC social workers are doing in terms of that prevention piece, really focusing on that connection, getting into classrooms, providing those tier 1 supports and programs, providing opportunities for leadership, providing opportunity, like creating different clubs and opportunities for students to come together. And we are seeing that students are responding to that. We recognize that there is that, I think there's a collective sense of stress. There's normal stress for kids. We know that it's amplified. I think we're all working very hard together. It is that shared responsibility where that tiered model is very effective. You know, teachers are very, very comfortable with, you know, with the resources, but also really working hard to identify, you know, especially when they're seeing a change in a baseline, as you know, with identify the student need and know who the critical element is, knowing who to connect that student with, you know, and it requires conversations, consultations, you know, at that tier 1, tier 2, and that tier 3 as well. And social workers are doing an excellent job in terms of responding to those tier 3 students. You know, they do those assessments and they connect them with the mental health and addictions nurses and our community agencies when needed. And we see that as a well-functioning system. It's the foundation of what we do, and it's been very effective. And I would ask Oliver and Jane if, sorry, Brenda, I was just
no,
gonna say,
that's okay, Glenda. No, that's okay. If you guys
Jane
want to,
and Oliver have anything else to add to that.
Well, from my perspective, I can say that we're still seeing the fallout of the increased mental health needs of students at the higher level. Just by the number of external reports that our psychology staff review, the amount of notes from medical providers and from psychology and other health professionals regarding mental health is quite high. So it's still there. So we recognize that we still have, and in terms of those students who are the higher tier of intense mental health needs, it's still very prevalent at this point.
I would agree with that. I think, as Glenda said, the tiered model really does sort of inform the work. And from a social work perspective, you know, we can see sometimes those mental health pieces being reflected in attendance and worries around attendance and kids, you know, being able to get to school, managing anxiety, whatever that anxiety is sort of stemming from. It's different for everyone. But for sure, there's like, you know, the work is brisk right now. Like, you know, that we're seeing kids are stopping in at offices once they've been connected with the CYC and social worker. But, you know, hopefully we'll see a trend where things are settling a little bit, but the pandemic certainly has had a profound impact on all of us, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see maybe in you know, future conversations about you know, what if we're seeing more effectiveness of that tier 1 because we're starting to see less of the tier 2 and tier 3. That'll be interesting because, again, I mean, you know, I'm obviously not an educated person to comment, but, you know, I go into the schools and you can feel it. There's a different level of energy. We're seeing kids involved in activities that haven't been in the previous years. There's some excitement, some things to look forward to. So again, hopefully all of those interventions that are being implemented at that tier 1 level are going to start to implement, you know, we're going to see the effect on the tier 2 and tier 3, recognizing we'll always have students there, but it'll be really interesting as a lay person to see what that impact looks like, you know, later on the tier 2 and tier 3, now that the tier 1's back in, you know, action a little bit.
And Brenda, in response to that as well, one of the things that, you know, the feedback, you know, hearing back from CYCs who are delivering a lot of that tier 1 programming is that it makes an immense difference that those tier 1 programs and class-wide presentations are happening in person. The difference in terms of engagement is massive. Yeah. It's that personal connection. You know, you're able to read body cues and you're able to see it. I mean, we know that in-person connection and engagement is much higher in all of the program delivery. So I think that's what that will be the critical element moving forward is we're back to doing things as we did in prior years where we're in person, building those relationships in different ways. That's, that's very different than trying to engage, on a virtual platform. And so that's where we're really hopeful is that, and we do collect data. So I think that, it's something that we can track across the course of this school year and compare and contrast from the last year. So we are collecting data. And I think that that's where the evidence will be in terms of the success of what we're doing. I will tell you, there are so many initiatives and programs happening. I had my CYC department meeting today, and the number of things that social workers and CYCs are doing in the system is incredible. And they are seeing the needs and they're seeing the gaps in social skills, and students themselves are asking for things like PALS, playground activity leadership. So we're really starting back to those kinds of, grassroots, building those relationships. Students are asking for it. We're responding. And so hopefully, it'll be a different conversation maybe in May. We'll see. But I think, the fact that we are in person providing these supports and resources, does make an absolute difference.
That's really encouraging. I mean, and we always say this often at SEAC when you come to present. I mean, the work that you do, we know is so vital and so important. And we know that you've always, you're looking for sort of the next approach and the next program to implement and, what is out there and trying to really gauge what the students and staff and parents are needing. So, but, it's always great to hear you present. And, I look forward to seeing, again, maybe that compare and contrast later on to see how things are doing. But I just want to thank you again. Your work is very, very appreciated. And thank you for presenting and always keeping us up to date and informed on what you have going on in your departments, because it obviously, it sometimes even plays a bigger role with some of our identified students, right? And so I think it's really important for all of us here at SEAC. So thank you very much. To the three of you, it was great to see you again, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thanks, guys. Everyone. Have a great evening. Enjoy.
You as well.
Thank you. Okay. Jody, you're doing a great job, by the way. Okay, moving on to the approval of the minutes. So we have everybody again would have received copies of the minutes in their package. And so I'll need an approval for the minutes. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the minutes from the September 26th meeting? Maria?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I did have a comment, I think a change that I'd like to see. Is it possible to put them up on the screen and just go down to the SEAC discussion part, which is towards the end? Okay, are we there? Oh. Yeah. Okay, so excuse me. So it says members caution about confidentiality when speaking about personal experiences. So that's not the conversation that I recall. And I went back and I listened to the video. The issue that, and I raised it, was that we're not supposed to be talking about personal experiences, and that's per our guidelines, which everyone approved, and that's per our longstanding practice here. So that's the discussion we had, and I think that needs to be better reflected here. And as well, my understanding was we were going to bring it back for a more fulsome discussion about how we move forward with that. So I don't see it on the agenda for tonight. So I think it should be on the business arising as something that we can maybe put on another agenda.
Okay, we can add it to business arising.
Yeah, and I would just maybe amend the minutes to say a concern was raised regarding discussion of personal experiences or something like that, contrary to the SEAC guidelines.
What we can do is we can take a listen again to the meeting and come up with some suggested wording.
Okay, so should we defer the approval then until we have the wording? Because we can't really approve
do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so business arising from previous meetings, we're going to add to that. I think that's a good conversation to have. We can bring our updated code of conduct and guide that has been developed and bring that into the conversation and add that there so that we can add that to our next agenda for the meeting. So we'll make a note to have that added to the business arising. Does anybody have any questions on the existing business arising? Yep. Maria?
Sorry, just my usual one. It sounded like there was some progress being made on that letter, and I'm just wondering if we're any further ahead on that. The letter to the minister about our funding.
Yeah, Rick, do you want to comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, so I've drafted a little bit of the letter. As I look more into the different components of the special education grant, I wanted to get some numbers of ONSIS from HCDSB, so some of our numbers for kids that are identified and students that are not identified, so I can look at some of the budget allotments, I guess, for the last couple of years and compare that to provincially. It's kind of a the province did increase funding for spec ed programming and services by $68 million this year. I think it's 2 or 3%, maybe 2%. It's not a lot, so I don't know where most of that's going to go and compare it to what we have coming towards Oakville. Towards Halton Catholic. So I have prepared, so to answer Maria's question, I prepared kind of the first half of the letter, and then I need to do like a little bit of data or background to kind of throw in there to support, I guess asking for changes or asking to look at maybe tweaking that model as it pertains to what HCDSB receives, I guess. So I'll be sending an email request to you guys for some ONSIS data. I'm not quite sure what I'm looking for, but I'm going to put that into an email request, and then we can get, hopefully before the end of this term, which would be the next meeting, a letter to look at, maybe send off, or have everyone look at it and have their 2 cents in, and hopefully get this maybe sent off and maybe some change, hopefully, from the province.
Yeah, that's perfect. And thanks, Rick. And if you need to engage any staff to assist with data collection or providing any information like that, please don't hesitate to reach out as well. They can be an excellent resource for that.
That's great. Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah, sorry, problem. I don't know. I can't figure out how to get my chat box, but I just want to say, Rick, that sounds like a really well thought out and well researched letter is coming. And I think that's really fantastic. I think it's worth taking that time to be well informed and present a well informed letter. So thank you for your work there.
You're welcome.
All right, so moving on to item number 6, the Special Education Board Policy Review. We do have a policy here for review this evening. It's policy II-5. Oh, you're too fast for me. It's policy. It's policy II-52, student use of service animals in schools. Superintendent Ballo, over to you.
Thank you. I can certainly begin. I'm just waiting for Jody to pull that up. Jody just said, is she taking the minutes tonight? So I think she's okay. We will take care of that. I appreciate her helping, certainly, with the meeting as it is. So, okay, there's our student use of service animals in schools. It was included in your package. It may be a little difficult to read. So hopefully you've had some time to take a look at it in advance. I would just like to make a few comments, and then really what the purpose of tonight is to gather any feedback that SEAC may have on the policy as it's written. This is definitely not the final version of the policy. There've just been some high-level changes that have been made to it, really around some of the observations that we've experienced in actually using the policy. And I do know that it is still going to our policy working group, etc. So I did want to put that out there just to start the conversation. This policy was adopted. It was actually created in 2019. There was a PPM that was issued that year, PPM 163. And that PPM required that all school boards develop a policy on having service animals in schools. So that's how this policy originated. And I think it's a good policy because it definitely streamlines the process. It provides very clear guidelines for all school boards to follow when it comes to having students using service animals in schools. So with regards to the associated policy right off the bat, we have added VI 46, which is the use of service animals by the general public. And it's an important point to add. And we also added a point, I believe, under the principles. Looked at this a while ago. It's the last bullet, and it stipulates that the use of service animals by the general public is covered in a separate and specific procedure. And it's important to articulate that because it wasn't clearly stated in this policy. So if somebody's looking for information about having animals in schools, like if a visitor is coming to the school, that's not what this policy is about. This is about a student having a service animal to access the curriculum, to be part of their day in, day out at school. So we thought it was important to include that comment and to include the procedure. So somebody who's looking at this policy knows exactly where to find the information that they need to bring an animal. So as I said, we haven't made any significant changes. The purpose remains the same. We did add 2 references to this policy. We added both the AODA and the Human Rights Code. They're both in the procedure, and the procedure is a more fulsome document. And frankly, we're going to need to put a little more work into our procedure than the policy. The policy, I think, doesn't need too many changes. The procedure, now that we've used it, I think that's sort of the beauty of being at the beginning and at this point, is we've actually referred to this procedure and policy several times now. So walking through the documents, we've been able to identify specifically in the procedure where there are some procedural pieces that we could do a better job of organizing the procedure, even the order. We have the definitions in 2 different parts. I know that the focus here is policy, but I guess the point I'm making is the policy is pretty good. It's the procedure that we need to do a little more work on now that we've used it, and we really do reference it a lot. Well, not a lot, but when we have a request, it's definitely like our go-to. We go through that procedure to make sure that we're doing all of the pieces that need to be done. So the references, we added the 2. The definitions we've left the same, but we have put them in alpha order. We've kept the definition of service animal, and a service animal does mean a certified animal that provides supports relating to a student's disability or medical related needs to assist the student in meaningfully accessing education. And that could be a certified dog, a service dog, a guide dog. There are different definitions for different types of service animals, and that's why that definition was selected when the policy was created. With regards to the principles, again, we've left them the same, but we're definitely open to hearing any feedback from SEAC. That's the purpose of this, not for us to necessarily come with all the changes. We want to hear from you. I will note that there is a bullet, it's the 3rd bullet from the bottom, that speaks to student transportation. And we contacted student transportation actually very recently to say, we're reviewing our policy. Do you have any feedback or any comments that you would offer to us? Are there any situations, and we know how many service animals we have in our system because we do collect that data, and we've collected the data already based on the service animals that we had last year and any new requests that schools have received this year. So we are very involved in that process. So in speaking with transportation, their process remains the same, and it does say in the policy that we collaborate with them about how they can access board transportation if they have a service animal. And their communication with us has been very clear that if we approve having a service animal, then they support us in making sure that that student can have the service animal on the bus. It's not a conversation that happens after the fact. It's really once we approve it, they're very good to support that need if that is a need, and not all students take a school bus. So I just wanted to point that out as well as a point of reference in terms of the consultation that we've done in preparing for the review of the policy. And then at the end, we struck the 1st bullet because it says that the board has to develop a procedure. So when this policy was developed in 2019, subsequent to that, a procedure was developed, so it no longer applies. And there's a point there around data collection and needing to collect data, and we definitely do that. We've surveyed and got information back from every one of our schools this year, based on the service animals that they had last year and any new requests that they've had for this year. So that's kind of an overview of like the broad changes. I know our policy working group is just reviewing it this week as well. We're a bit ahead of the cycle with they're happening this week as well. So I'm very open. If anybody has any feedback, I can certainly take that down.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Does anybody have any questions, Maria?
I don't have feedback on the policy itself. I want to say too, like it seems like yesterday this was a brand new policy that came to us, so it's crazy. It's at its 3rd year interval already. But I think I heard you say that there was going to be more work done on the procedure, and so I'm just wondering if that would come to SEAC for feedback as well, and also for SEAC members to be aware of the changes. I know that procedures are not approved by the Board of Trustees, but they do go to them as information. And I do think it's our role to provide input into those sort of things. So I was just wondering if that would be coming as well.
I think what I could offer, it won't be coming to the meeting because we bring policies to the meeting, but the procedures are public information and the associated procedure is in this policy. So I would say that if there are any recommendations or suggestions that you would like to make, you can email them directly to myself. You can copy all of SEAC. And I can take those suggestions to our senior admin team.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks, Stephanie. Did anybody else have any comments or questions at this point? Stephanie, if anyone does sort of have a moment of reflection after our meeting or hasn't had time to really take a look at the policy as close as you would like, what would be the drop dead date for you to receive feedback from our members?
I would say by the 26th, which is Wednesday of next week, if that's okay.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, so for anybody, or if there was someone that's not here this evening, that they need to have a little bit more time. So the 26th. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think I'm up again.
Yeah, I think you are too. All right, so we are moving on to item number 7, our action and information items. We have the Spirit of Inclusion award criteria. You're up again, Stephanie.
Okay, great. So in your package, you would have received 2 documents that go along with the Spirit of Inclusion. And, you know, you talk about how quickly time goes. It's like, here we are again. And there are 2 pages. So the first page is an explanation of the criteria for the award and the awards that are shared and are selected. So last year, the year before, I believe, because I haven't been through the old version when we used to join in the boardroom, we did create a form for all of our schools to be able to submit their nomination. And then we formed a subcommittee the last 2 years, and I know you had done that prior as well. So I guess the ask this evening would be to see who would be interested in being part of the subcommittee, is part of the reason why this is on the agenda. And the other part is to take a look at the criteria that we have to see if there are any suggested changes in terms of any of it. So currently we have 3 students, 1 elementary, 1 secondary, and 1 secondary student from our alt education who are chosen each year. The eligibility is there. They have to be an HCDSB student. And every school has the opportunity to nominate 1 pupil from their school. And then there's selection criteria there that you can take a look at. There's the name of the award. The motto is where every success begins with I can. And then there's the presentations at the bottom. So we do provide 3 small plaques for the student recipients and then 3 large plaques for the recipient schools. We did invite the students to a SEAC meeting as well to present them. We weren't in person, so this year hopefully we can do that in person. And we recognize the students at the Students Award of Excellence, the top students that are selected. So open to any comments.
Perfect, thank you. Nancy, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks, Brenda. How do you want us to let you know if we're interested? Do you want us to just email Stephanie or?
Sure,
okay,
maybe what I can do after the meeting tonight is we can send an email tomorrow to all of SEAC, and then if you want to respond to the email, and we'll call it specifically the Spirit of Inclusion Awards Subcommittee. And then if you want to reply to that, we can keep track.
Amazing. Thank you. One of my favorite times of the year.
Okay, great. And I think the
Okay,
process.
is there any other questions or comments?
Process worked, right? So I think we'll keep it the same.
It worked really well.
Okay, great.
And I know that we spent some time on the criteria before, so that's been revamped. So yeah, I think it's all working well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Okay. Sorry, was there any other questions on that anybody had?
Sorry,
Yep.
Brenda, I don't know if you can see, I just put my hand up. Just dawned on me. I'm not sure when this work starts. I know the awards are in April, but should we wait until the new SEAC is in place to seek out volunteers, or at least have some space in case members of the new group, assuming there may be some changes, would want to be part of this as well?
Would you like me to answer?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, sure. If you don't mind.
I can offer some timeline anyway. So we would be asking schools to submit their name by December the 16th is when we traditionally have done so, because it gives us a little time to follow up with any schools that haven't done so in January and get the information to the organizing committee. I'm certainly open if there's, an interest from SEAC to hold off. Our first meeting as a new SEAC is December the 12th. So if you want to propose it to the new SEAC completely, you let me know what you want to do, and then we can adjust on our side.
Maria, do you have a follow-up?
Well, no, I think it makes sense. Again, I don't know how much turnover there's going to be, but and I wouldn't want to hold up the process, but it doesn't sound like it would if I understood the dates correctly. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know how the rest of the group feels.
Anybody else have a comment?
If they aren't due until December 16th, we could pull our subcommittee together in January. That's the deadline for the schools to get the names to us.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense to do that. I don't know. That's my 2 cents anyways, like I said.
Rick, do you want to, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. I'm gonna agree with the dates. I don't think there's an issue with any changes in SEAC. At the end of the day, the schools are still sticking with their own dates, and we can forming that subcommittee in January is fine. I think we had the one meeting, I believe, in late February, early March to at least we have last few years. So I think that works. Just my 2 cents. Sorry.
Perfect.
Okay, so then I can hold on to the email if you'd like, and then send the email after our SEAC is established for committee members.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to 7.2. Sorry, I was just pulling up. So SEAC goal setting. So you'll recall that we had a conversation at our last meeting about setting goals, recognizing that we may have some turnover come the new term, but we had sort of talked about if anybody did have any suggestions on priorities that they thought would be important to even you have a new group coming in, they're not always sure sort of what's going on. And sometimes it is nice to have a little bit of information to sort of start off with. So there's nothing there, Jody. It was just a survey that I had sent out. So you're probably frantically looking for it, but it's not there. I had only received one response to the survey. There was a lot of great information actually in it. So I was, kind of leaving it to see if anybody responded before this evening. But I will share that information with the group. It was very, yeah, I'll share the information with the group. I won't do it here, but I will send the comments that were made in the survey. I'll send that out to all of the SEAC members for consideration. And you know, if it's something that, again, that we want to collect and put forward, I think it would actually be really nice if we did have something like that available to the next group coming in to sort of say, you know, here were the priorities that we had been looking at prior. This is what we may have, you know, achieved or not been able to do. And here were some of the things that members had thought about for consideration moving forward. So like I said, I only had one response to the survey, but the suggestions were actually really fulsome and really I think applicable. So I will share that with the group, and we can, you know, again, put that into some sort of document or some sort of piece that we can share with the new group that's coming in. Yeah, that's really all that I had to say about that. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that goal setting beyond what we talked about last meeting. If there's anything else that you wanted to add, please feel free to do that. There's still time if you want to provide some insights as to suggestions on goal setting. I think that's always welcome. Again, recognizing that we may have members coming in that may not be entirely sure, you know, what's going on or having to orientate themselves. And I think it's nice for them to have a little bit of a guideline there. So that's all that I had for the SEAC goal setting. Again, one response back, but some great suggestions that I'll share. Does anybody have any questions on that at all before I move forward? No? Okay, perfect. So moving on to board committee updates. So the first one is Mental Health and Wellbeing Advisory Committee. We were actually, I think, supposed to have a meeting, and that was rescheduled. We haven't got the rescheduled date yet, but we're certainly looking forward to that meeting, but for whatever reason, it needed to be rescheduled. So that meeting has not taken place, but there is a new meeting date that will be coming. So that is for 8.1, Mental Health and Wellbeing Advisory Steering Committee. 8.2, I don't know if we still have a de-streaming committee. Does that still need to stay on there? Is there anything happening with that? Or do we need to take that off? Maria?
Yeah, so I haven't heard anything still. I hope there's still a de-streaming committee because there's more that, like I said at the last meeting, I think that de-streaming committee was struck when they were de-streaming the grade 9 math, but they've added a lot more to that now. I don't even know it all. And I imagine it's going to continue. So I would think I don't know if Superintendent Ballo has any information, but I would think it would be important to continue that work for sure. But I haven't heard anything in a really, really long time.
Yep, Stephanie, do you have any insight on that?
Sure, I have inquired, and I don't believe that the de-streaming committee, well, I know the de-streaming committee has not picked up at this point. I think that they are just sort of figuring out their next steps. I do know that there has been work and some information that's gone out to the system with regards to new science curriculum. There's definitely some teachers who worked over the summer on some working groups, some writing groups for de-stream subjects, and I'll let you know as soon as I know. I did ask. I did want to loop back to the mental health as well, and we did postpone the meeting because we have our student trustees who are part of that meeting, and they also wanted to have the student senate reps who joined us for our last meeting in June. So we put that on hold because I believe that they're going to be establishing their student senate members next week. So we figured it was just a week out. We'll wait, and then they can attend the meeting because we meet 3 times a year.
Perfect. Yeah, makes complete sense.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie.
No problem.
Equity Audit Committee, we haven't had anything. Equity and Inclusion Committee, nothing since the last meeting. But I do, so STEAM Committee, I don't know if there's been anything there, but we also need, I think, to add some committees as well to this, but has there been anything for STEAM?
Not that I know of. I know I'm one of the 2 people that are supposed to be on there representing SEAC, but I haven't heard anything about that one either.
Okay. So if we can make a note, we also need to now add the Anti-Bullying Prevention Committee. We do have SEAC representation on that committee, so we need to add that there. And Nancy, does HREAC, does that need to be added as well?
I think you had to apply for.
No, but
we don't,
yeah, that's, so we don't have, is
right,
that have?
we don't have like somebody from SEAC, we don't
Okay,
have somebody
okay.
from, so yeah, that's, that was an
Okay, I
application and it
wasn't
went
sure.
out to all community groups, so.
Right. Okay, perfect. I know that there was a meeting last evening, so I just wasn't sure if there was representation from there, but we'll for sure add the bullying prevention committee. And do we have any others that I'm thinking? There's been a few that have been created, but maybe that's it. But I'll double check and we'll add any applicable committees to with the appropriate SEAC rep to the next meeting agenda. Okay, great. So communication to SEAC, so 9.1. Stephanie, you're up again.
Thank you. Okay. So we've had a number of CLCs, Catholic Learning Communities, with a variety of different staff teams that we have in special education specifically. We've had our first of 2 gifted CLCs, and that was after our first SEAC meeting. The focus was on STEAM, technology, infographics, mental health, and some new initiatives for the school year. We also had our first meeting with our A4 CLC, and the topics included outdoor and experiential learning opportunities, A4 programming tools, transitions, and pathway planning. We also had our first ESC, so our essential skills class. They came together and they focused on delivering information and resources, again, on mental health strategies, how to effectively use assistive technology with students, and reviewing and developing the first term IEP. We also had a CLC with all of our new certs who have been hired, and they focused on ELITE referrals, waivers, IPRCs, the gifted screening process, and in any of the essentials regarding students who are on an alternative curriculum. And then we had the pleasure of coming together for the first time in person with the certs from all of our elementary schools and our sets, as well as the department heads from secondary. It was a great day. A lot of really great information that was shared with everybody. We have some new systems around Special Education Connections, which is a site to share resources across the system. Our behavior analysts also did a presentation. We have a new IEP toolkit resource that was shared with all of our staff. And then there were some updates around SIA and ELITE. I think it's my favorite day that we've had so far. There was definitely a buzz in the room, having everybody, we were well over 100 people coming together, and it's the first time that the certs have all been in the same place at the same time, and this is year 3. So it was really important, not only for PD, but to connect with other people and to make those personal connections, because there's a lot of opportunities there to lean on people. With regards to training, we have had a session. We had teachers who have students in their class who are deaf and hard of hearing receive in-person training, and participants learned about the impact of hearing loss, both socially and academically, and how to support students with hearing loss in a classroom setting, including a review of equipment use. And we had an excellent rate of participation. The teachers were very interested and happy to be able to have that opportunity. We had 14 educators receive in-person training in running the Stay, Play, and Talk program, which is a kindergarten program. It's supported over 8 weeks by an SLP and a CDA to foster social communication and belonging through peer-mediated prompting. And again, that's for kindergarten classes. As a follow-up to the report that I provided in September at our SEAC meeting about Empower, I did share at that time that we've expanded our model of having system Empower certs over the course of the last 2 years so that all schools can run an Empower program in their school, which is amazing. An Empower cert has been provided to run the program at each school for one period above and beyond the period that the school currently offers. And this is made possible through a combination of temporary funding, including the tutoring funding. We actually held a refresher, and we'll be offering it again for all certs running Empower Decoding for grades 2 to 5 this year. We do have an MOU with Sick Kids Hospital, and part of the agreement there is that we will have our staff participate in refresher training, which is always a good idea. We have a few new initiatives. We have a program called Job Launch. It's a pre-employment training program that incorporates in-class training with practical job training. It's a collaboration with our community Living Oakville and Explore Employment, and they have started the program in our secondary schools and our life skills classes. The program will focus on providing students with intellectual disabilities, necessary skills, and coaching in preparation for employment. A job coach from Explore Employment will run weekly workshops for one full period each week within each class for 6 to 8 weeks, and the instructional focus will include career exploration, skills for success, resume building, making a good first impression, and interview preparation. And we're happy to announce the recent updates to the Project Search Canada website. As you know, we have already had one cohort graduate, and we've had our second cohort of Project Search interns start this year. They've completed their orientation. The website is actually featuring all of the Canadian programs. Traditionally, it's been an American-based program, and we're happy to be featured on their website. We have quite a few photos of the program that we ran last year. And there's also a video highlighting one of our graduates, Justin, and he's sharing his success story going from Project Search to employment. So we're really proud of all of the students who graduated and proud of Justin for being featured on there. IEPs went home this week. They went home on the 18th. They were sent electronically. All schools are now using a new digital process to have parents sign and return their IEPRC waiver and IEP consult log. And then lastly, there was some information that was distributed to CERTs that they could share with families about the sensory-friendly Mass that is offered in the diocese. The sensory-friendly Mass occurs on the second Sunday of the month at 3 p.m. at Mary Mother of God Parish in Oakville. So they're resuming that practice, which is great. If SEAC is interested, we can certainly share the flyer after the meeting as well. And that's all of my updates.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Yeah, if you could share that, that would be great. And then people can share it around with their associations. That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is there any questions at all with respect to the superintendent's report? No? Okay. Thank you. Next up is the trustee report. Trustee Duart, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my update for this meeting, since the last meeting, we have had two board meetings, one on October 4th and October 18th. On the October 4th, at the October 4th board meeting, there was an action item on universal washrooms where trustees asked staff to conduct a feasibility study, the goal of bringing, creating universal and barrier-free washrooms for students or staff at each and every HCDSB school, as well as the SEAC. And that report is to be presented at the January 17th, 2023 regular board meeting. There was also an information report on the strategic plan for years 2016 to 2021, and trustees were provided with the monitoring results of year 6 of implementation at HCDSB in comparison with our multi-year strategic plan. At the October 18th board meeting, there was one delegation on regional programs to promote engaged learning and bolster enrollment, which was accepted as information. There were several action items at this same meeting, and I'm just highlighting a couple of them. There was a policy I-12, emergency response, plan for fire evacuation, lockdown, hold and secure shelter in place, and bomb threat, which was reviewed and it was passed. Then there was a motion on the expansion of the arts program at HCDSB, which asked staff to bring a feasibility report on creating a specialized art program at elementary and secondary levels for implementation in HCDSB in the next couple of years. And this report is to be presented at the March 7th, 2023 board meeting, and this motion passed. Another action item which we had was on student achievement and learning gaps. This motion asked the Director of Education to produce a report identifying current trends in learning gaps in secondary and in elementary by different categories. In elementary by literacy and numeracy, to be brought back to the Board of Trustees on Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. It is also to include an itemized action plan with target dates to reduce and/or close the gaps during the 2022-23 school year and summary, if applicable, and this motion passed too. So finally, we are at the end of 4 years of being a trustee, and it's been my pleasure to be a member on SEAC for 4 years. And I want to thank my alternate trustee, Guzo, who has helped me fill in for SEAC on most occasions, and trustee Carabella on a couple, and bring reports. And I really want to thank them and appreciate the good work done by trustees. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm happy to take any questions if there are.
You left out a trustee, but that's okay. Does anybody have any questions at all for Trustee Dewart?
Whom did I leave out?
Just the trustee that's chairing the meeting.
You. Thank you so much.
I don't need accolades. It's all good, Trustee Dewart.
How do I thank you?
Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any questions for Trustee Dewart on his report? I know that was covering 2 board meetings. Does anybody have any questions at all? No, all good. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so we're moving on to SEAC discussion item questions. And I did put an item here that came up one of our previous board meetings. And so I brought it here for a SEAC discussion. You will have seen that policy in your board package. Oh, great. Thanks, Jody. And this certainly is not to exclude any other items that might come forward for SEAC discussion. I don't want to be monopolizing this particular item on this agenda item, but I did want to bring this forward so that we could have a discussion with SEAC with respect to this. And so the policy that's here is with respect to educational field trips. And I have made some suggested changes, and this was brought to our policy meeting where we had a great conversation about it. And part of the conversation was for us to bring this to SEAC and to CPIC. I believe it went to CPIC on Monday night, I believe, for conversation. So do you mind scrolling up a little bit, Jody? Scrolling down, I guess, down, sorry. Okay, so here's where the majority of the changes. So the idea behind this is that, you know, our staff does a great job in an attempt to create opportunities for all students with respect to field trips and other board activities. But unfortunately, not all of those field trips are accessible. And you know, too often we find that there is something that has been booked and then there is, you know, accommodations or considerations that are made sort of after the fact to try to ensure participation in that particular event. And that could be things like if there's barriers there, it could be like adding a ramp, it could be adding something to a washroom, it could be a sensory piece, it could be, you know, something like that. And so, and it's not just about accessibility. I think that's really important to mention. It could be people who have students who may have medical conditions, who may require sensory friendly environments, things like that. And so, so the idea is for us to change the wording in the policy so that we have stronger language, that we need to ensure that these opportunities are fully inclusive and accessible to any and all students that want to participate. So that would be at the school level, and then we would also see that at any board level activities, and that could be cross country, it could be track and field, it could be Journey with Jesus. So some of those larger board-wide initiatives. And you know, the bigger work that's going to go into a change like this, I think, is going to be procedural, because it's going to be the hows. This is sort of the why, but it's going to be the hows in the ability to do this. And all of the things that'll have to be taken into consideration and the different mechanisms that'll need to be put in place to ensure that these opportunities are fully accessible and inclusive, again, for any student and staff that want to participate. And then for some of those larger board-wide initiatives, from any parents or visitors that want to participate, because we also have heard from parents who have had challenges accessing some of those larger board-wide initiatives. And so this is the policy in these. I worked with a member of staff to make some suggested changes, small changes, but a little stronger in their wording. And if this policy is approved, then the accompanying procedure will be reviewed and amended and updated, changed, all of those words to meet the actual policy. So again, it was in your package for review and consideration. I think there was a good conversation at CPIC about it the other evening. We have brought it to SEAC, obviously. Wanted to have SEAC's input, if there was any at all, to get your perspective and your thoughts on this. Again, recognizing that we do have a number of students who may have special education needs or specific identifications that could be impacted by this. And we know that we do have members around the table who represent associations who may have students in that group. So I'm done talking. Does anybody have any questions or comments with respect to the suggested changes to this policy? Maria?
Yeah, I haven't, I'll be honest, I haven't gone through the changes. I'm happy to see this come to SEAC because I did tune in for the board meeting where some of these issues were raised and discussed. And I was sitting there thinking, this is something that should come to SEAC. But I guess where I'm struggling a little bit is, again, just with consistency, because I know in the past, like we wanted to bring a policy because we felt it was applicable to gifted students and it was in the spec ed plan. The process was in the spec ed plan under the gifted section. And we weren't able to because we were told it wasn't a special education policy. So I'm fine with whatever the rules are, but I'd like to see them applied sort of consistently. So I don't want to belabor the point right now, but I guess if we're going to bring back the guidelines to discuss the point about personal experiences being discussed, maybe we could discuss the policy piece as well. Like how do we decide which policies come to us and who makes that decision and that sort of thing. I just would like to see a bit of a discussion about that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I can't really comment on that. This policy came to the policy meeting and there was a conversation about bringing it to SEAC. So if there's been other policies that haven't come before now, then sure, if you want to bring that conversation forward for a different agenda, we can do that. I'm confused on the consistency piece. And I don't think that this wasn't a personal ask, if you will, to have this brought to this meeting this evening. The discussion did happen at our board table, at our policy meeting about bringing this specifically to SEAC and CPIC for their input. So that's how it's landed here for this discussion item. But by all means, if there's an item that you want to add to a future agenda, please let us know and we can add that.
Well, there's not a policy right now that I'm wanting to come forward. I do remember with the other one, it was the PLAR policy, and there was some discussion. There were some trustees there as well that suggested it coming to SEAC. So, but I don't know if it came down to a vote going one way or the other. I'm not sure, but I'm just suggesting that if we're going to look at our guidelines for the one piece, we could have a discussion about this as well, right? While we have it on the table, wouldn't hurt.
Sure. If you want to add that to a future agenda, just let us know and we can add that to a future agenda.
Okay. Do you want an email? Because I feel like I'm letting you know right now, but I'm happy to email it. That's not a problem.
Well, it's really up to you, Maria. If you want to let me know now informally, we can add it. If you want to add it when we set the agenda, you go ahead and do that, whatever you think. But we'll have it in the minutes of the meeting that it was brought up. So
yeah, I would like to have it. I would like to have it brought forward. So I'll just leave that.
Why don't you I think what I'm looking for is why don't you actually give us specifically what the topic that is that you'd like to, the actual topic that you want us to add to the agenda with respect to the conversation or the discussion so that we can make sure that we're capturing. So is it just policies for review? Is it, what is it? So if you can just, maybe let me know, then we can add that specifically as an agenda item.
Sure.
Right. Was there any other questions or comments with respect to this policy specifically? Yes, Nancy, go ahead.
Thanks, Brenda. I was just going to say, I think CPIC reviewed it too the other day, and I think that it was received very positively. So I think it's great that everybody's kind of having some eyes on it, and I think there's some great proposed changes. So, you know, like you said, there's so much staff that do such wonderful work when it comes to these things being planned from a higher level from the board when they're board-wide things. I think these considerations really need to not just be considered, but you know, part of the decision. So thank you for doing this, and thank you to the parents who brought it forward as well, who advocated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really where, you know, this sort of belongs, is you know, the concerns and challenges that were brought forward, but all in the spirit of wanting to find solutions and just trying to find ways to, you know, it's challenging when we do such great work, and then, you know, you may have one instance that didn't go well or may not have been inclusive, and then it tends to sort of, you know, tar, if you will, some of the other great work. So yeah, so thank you to the parents who brought this forward, and you know, and staff has been great about these discussions, and I think it can be really positive, and I look forward to seeing what that procedure looks like. But again, if same deadline, Superintendent Ballows, September or October 26th, if anybody has any additional comments they would like to make on this. I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah, I think that date would work for both of them, and then I'll get the feedback over to policy. I just wanted to comment, if I could, Brenda. Yes, I think part of one of the items that came up at policy as well was getting feedback from parents.
Yes.
That was raised a couple times, and I'm not sure. I just didn't want it to go missed. So maybe that's part of the discussion. Like, is there a need or not to share it with parents, and how we would go about that? Not hearing any like feedback that's opposed to the changes here at SEAC. So that's what I will note, but.
Yeah, you're right. So, and how do we get that out in a timely fashion? And in what mechanism? Yeah, so yeah, I think that's great. So thank you for that. Do we, as a committee here, want to see this in some manner? We'll have to figure out what that's going to be, but to elicit feedback from other parents that may be impacted by this policy. And if we feel that that's something that, you know, we'd like to see, then we could certainly connect with the communications department, I guess, and figure out how we would do that.
Yes.
Yeah. If we, you know, if we think that it's, I don't want to use the word sufficient because that's not right, but if we feel that, you know, by having CPIC and SEAC review it, that would, you know, represent a good lens and a good set of eyes on it, you know, are we okay with that? Or would the members of SEAC like it to be sent out for more broader feedback from the parent community? Okay, so it looks like we can leave it as it is.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you for that. There was so much conversation. I had completely forgot about that. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so where are we now? Where are we now? Sorry, thank you, Jody. Okay, we are meeting summary and next steps. So we do have a couple of things for our meeting summary. There was some conversation about some agenda items for our next meeting and adding to our business arising, and Superintendent Ballo is going to send out that flyer with respect to the special mass. So yeah, I think that was pretty much what we captured, but if there's anything that we missed, we'll make sure we review it. Oh, and the minutes too. We were going to take a look back or listen back at the previous meeting and come up with some suggested wording for the minutes of the meeting. So our next agenda is Monday, November the 7th. Absentee. I did receive regrets from Rhonda and from Jessica Lim. So we can do a motion to for absenteeism. If I have someone that can move that.
I'll move it. I'll second.
Oh, great.
Diane.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Diane. Can I get a seconder for that?
This is Rick. I'll second it.
Thanks so much, Rick. And then our final item is adjournment and closing prayer. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
Rick again.
Thanks so much, Rick. And someone to second that?
Diane.
Great. Thanks so much, Diane. I appreciate that. So we'll go into our closing prayer. If you can all join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Blessed are you, O God of all creation. Each day you spread before us the rich and wonderful diversity of the human family created in the divine splendor of your love. Fashioned in your image, you call us to love one another with the same tender care with which you brought us to creation. Each one of us is but one small part of the glory that is you. As we serve the students and families of the Halton Catholic District School Board on the Special Education Advisory Committee, fill us with your grace, guide us with your wisdom, and give us the strength and courage to do your work, so that it may always be said of our every act, God saw that it was good. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.